Hello and welcome to Altitude. Today we're going inside the world of operations planning and resilience, and we'll be looking ahead to another busy summer. I'm your host, Russell Porter, and I'm joined by Stephen Moore from Eurocontrol and Steve Fox from NATS. Steve, hello and welcome to Altitude.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Russell.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Before we come to your introductions, just a quick word for the audience, for those of you watching live. If you have any questions, do please put them into the chat, and we'll do our best to get to them as we progress through the show. So in terms of introductions, Stephen, would you like to go first, please?
Thank you, Russell, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen connected. It's a great pleasure to be here. Yeah, sure. My name's Stephen Moore. I'm head of network operations at Eurocontrol, the network manager. And I've been in this role since the very start of COVID, 1st of April 2020. Previous to that, I was at NATS for 24 years as a controller and various other roles throughout my time there. The network manager at Eurocontrol, based in Brussels. We're responsible for managing the flow of air traffic through the skies of Europe. Eurocontrol is not a European institution. It's an international organization, so we represent 42 member states or 42 countries across greater continental Europe, if you like, and have two associated states on top of that. So the whole of that airspace, if you like, comes into the Eurocontrol network play. With that, last summer we had an average daily number of flights in the network of around 37,200 on the busy summer periods, and so we're involved with planning and then managing the flows of traffic in very close conjunction with all of the stakeholders. So that's in a nutshell really what we're doing. I'll try not to go on too much and hand back.
Stephen, thank you very much. We'll unpack some of that as we go through the show, so thank you. And Steve, would you like to say hello?
Yeah, very good afternoon, Russell. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Steve Fox, Director of Ops Control for NATS. That's quite a broad area of responsibility that covers a lot of the air traffic management processes, some of which is internal to NATS that Stephen's described for Eurocontrol. So the air traffic flow management side from all phases, from planning all the way through pre-tactical to on-the-day flow management operations, and also the performance area as well. I also have responsibilities for incident management. I have responsibilities for airspace management, ATM support services. So that's things like our procedures, aeronautical information services and NOTAMs. And I also have responsibility for the customer team as well, which encapsulates my directorate completely as it's a real customer facing, whether that be internal or external stakeholder that we liaise with. So real broad range there. My background, I've been in NATS for 9 years now. Before that, I was 22 years with airlines and 2 years at an airport as well. So broad background, always operationally focused over the last over 30 years.
Thank you, Steve. And also we're really grateful to you for joining us today, because I know you're feeling a little bit under the weather.
I am. We'll get through it. Maybe a few coughing and spluttering along the way.
Thank you very much. So before we turn to today's operations and thinking ahead about this year, it would be nice to do a little bit of a retrospective on last year. So I wonder if, Stephen, you could perhaps give us your reflections from a network performance perspective.
Certainly. Thank you. So 2025 was relative to 2024, for example, a good year in the network by most benchmarks, whether you call it air traffic delay in the network, so flights being delayed through regulation as a result of capacity or other issues in the network, or by a financial measure. Airlines performed relatively well. So generally, it was a better year overall, and a lot of that, I think, is down to the hard collaboration and effort of the network, by which I don't mean us particularly. I mean the network manager working with all of the stakeholders and partners to get the very best year that we could. Probably also helped a little bit by a slightly less inclement summer weather, convective weather, thunderstorms, if you like, which weren't as prevalent as they were in 2024 for the summer period. And also some ANSPs, air traffic providers, were able to offer greater service capacity than they had the year before for various different reasons, some of which industrial action, for example, or a lack of it in 25, relatively speaking, all go into this large melting pot, if you like, that creates the aviation ecosystem, the ballet in the sky, where all of the stakeholders are doing all of these very small actions on a massive scale throughout the whole season, but in the planning and preparation as well. So yeah, a better year, but still lots of room for improvement.
Thank you, Stephen. I think we've got our first soundbite there as well, the ballet in the sky. You mentioned there room for improvement. What might that look like?
Well, so in many terms, the network is a huge conglomeration of different actors with different priorities. Of course, in all of this, and perhaps I should say, even at the start here today of this altitude session, safety is not taken for granted in any way, shape or form, but is at the heart of everything we do. So when we're talking today about network and network planning and air traffic management, air traffic management is a safety barrier. So if we don't mention safety again, it's not because it's not important, it's the very first thing that we're always doing. But thereafter, you can't just squeeze extra capacity out of the system without sometimes heavy investment in technology or in people, in recruiting more controllers, or airlines buying more aircraft to increase the demand, selling more tickets. So in that, I think there are some real key areas for the improvement that we can do this coming year. Now, we're reflecting on 2025, so I don't want to jump the gun to what we're trying to do this year, but certainly the lessons learned from last year are helping us to prioritise the planning for the summer ahead. And it's not just about the summer either. I mean, that's clearly the peak period, but, you know, even today, 28,000 flights in the airspace over a 24-hour period, it's still very, very busy, and the demand is very, very high.
Thank you, Stephen. Steve Fox, would you like to come in with your perspective on 2025?
Yeah, I think Stephen's given a good summary. Obviously, we work extremely closely together with Eurocontrol and the other states. But I think from our perspective, it was a very good summer. But actually, so was 2024 for us. 2024 was a really good year for NATS UK delay, but it got lost in that European system of delay because delay was so high for other states, which is actually a really important factor, isn't it, around when we see delay on any given flight, we don't know where in the network that's occurring as a customer. So you hear air traffic delay and you're perhaps in the UK and you think it's a UK caused issue, and often it's not. Often it's broader than that. So summer 25 for us was another good year. We achieved our internal targets. We handled more traffic than since 2019 actually is the highest number, over 2.53 million flights, and that is a real testament to the teams in our ops rooms of keeping that extremely safe. Our safety performance remains excellent, and as Stephen said, I can't overlook the fact that ATFM is the first barrier of preventing a controller from workload. So when we talk about delay in ATC, it's actually prevention of safety issues down the line, protecting those sectors from more traffic than a controller can reasonably manage.
If I may, sorry, Russell.
Come in, yeah,
two things immediately strike me there, Steve. Absolutely, ATFM is about that safety barrier, but it's also about ensuring that we're getting the optimal use of the capacity available. I would hate people to think that we're just worried about too much workload. Actually, too little workload is inefficient in the network in terms of what we're trying to achieve and what we're trying to deliver. So that's a very key point there. And I also think to the earlier point as well, yes, you're absolutely right. Making no one wrong, maybe you could read the subtext, but sometimes one is seated on an aircraft and one hears the infamous air traffic delay, and it might actually be nothing at all to do with air traffic management. It could be something else, and no one's telling lies, I'm certain of that, but misinformation, uncertainty sometimes is a challenge. So yeah, not everything is all related to air traffic. A lot of it is. A lot of the ATFM delay is, of course, related to various things. And as you say, Steve, anything coming out of Leeds or Edinburgh or wherever it may be in the UK. I mean, I'm lucky today down at Gatwick Airport, having had some meetings here. Any delays out of here in the summer could be down to the simple fact that the flight that you're on is going to an island like Heraklion, and there they can only handle 10 inbound aircraft an hour, but the demand is 15 or 20, or some are running late, some are running early, and so all of a sudden you've automatically ended up with a capacity and demand imbalance on a piece of concrete, let alone we're talking mostly about regulations and delays in the airspace. So it's a hugely complicated thing, isn't it?
It is, and I think you've you've raised a fantastic point around it's being efficient and ensuring that we deliver the best service as possible. And again, I totally agree with that. It's safety is one end of the balance, and it's then how can we be as efficient as possible to allow as much traffic through. And that's what our teams, from a planning perspective and in the ops room, are laser focused on delivering for the season ahead, which is probably moves us into the planning when we get into those discussions.
Thank you both. You talked there about capacity and optimizing the network. We've had a very apt question from our audience. So Philip has asked, does airspace ever get full, and how do you define what the capacity is? Who would like to take that one? Steve, would you like to?
I'll take that one from a UK perspective. Is essentially we judge it by movements per hour and occupancy in any given airspace. So if we think of the motorway in the skies philosophy of routes that go above the UK at all altitudes, they're split down into what we call sectors, which the controllers will manage certain sectors and specific areas of the airspace. So we monitor how many flights from a entry and exit level and an occupancy level are going through that piece of airspace at any one time. And through years of monitoring and the supervisors on the day monitoring how busy the controllers are getting, that's how we determine whether that piece of airspace is full, so to speak. And we then have to take action to reduce workload from the controllers in that sector. That's what then produces a reduction in capacity, and therefore when you get a slot in any given part of the airspace. And that can happen at an airport as well, if there's too many arrivals for any airport at any one time.
Thank you, Steve. And Stephen, you spoke about about optimizing the network, and I know that Eurocontrol have launched a campaign called Think Network. Can you tell us a little bit about that, who the target audience is, and what you're asking of them?
We're in danger, Steve and I, of always agreeing on these things because we come from well, Steve is airline based, I'm air traffic based, but a similar background. But ultimately, we have the similar aim, which is the efficiency and optimization of the network after that big safety banner at the start, if you like. So yes, Think Network is the latest iteration. It started last year, but of what used to be called Altogether Now, which was started by one of my colleagues who's since retired from Eurocontrol. Pre-COVID, it was just as things were getting really big in 2018, 2017, 19, delays were going up again to levels that hadn't been seen since the late 90s. And it's all about everyone having, all the stakeholders, be they airlines, who of course want to make money, and again, with safety being a given, they have different drivers to an ANSP, perhaps air traffic controllers, who are trying to ensure that just the right amount of aircraft are going through the airspace or landing on the runway. If you want to optimize as a business, you want to give or drive as much of your demand to fulfillment, and therefore you want the greatest capacity being offered. So there are differing priorities in the network by the different stakeholders, the airlines, the airports, the ground handlers, the air traffic controllers. They're all very different. So altogether now, which was all like we're all in this together type sort of approach, became think network. And what we're really asking is whether you be an air traffic controller in the tower or on radar, or whether you be a pilot at the pointy end, or you're the ground handler, the tug driver, the airport optimization of gates and gate allocation, where aircraft park and push back. Whatever your role, you are part of this massive ballet in the sky. There's that soundbite again, but the part of the aviation ecosystem. And in the decisions that you make, whether it be push back now, push back later, there's lots of different factors there. But think network. So if an aircraft can leave earlier than its scheduled time, whether it can leave earlier than a regulation, so the time it should depart, it leaves earlier. It shouldn't, but sometimes it happens. Or whether it's just leaving early on its schedule because it's all ready and it's great and let's go. That has knock-on effects. We have 6 priorities this summer under the Think Network banner. And I'll go through them very briefly. One we may come back to, but I'll just give you the acronym. One of them is disciplined flight plan execution, vertical execution. And the associated one that I'll come back to is PDPI, but let's ignore that for a second. So disciplined flight plan execution in the vertical phase is about aircraft flying at the level they filed at, wherever possible, aside from safety reasons or whatever else. And what do we mean by that? Well, Steve gave a great example of occupancy and capacity counts and monitoring values, if you like, per hour in a given bit of airspace. If an aircraft is due to fly at, let's say, 35,000 feet through a patch of airspace somewhere, let's say, over Hungary, and yet as it climbs out of the UK, because everyone's doing a grand job and the coordination between the UK controllers and the Maastricht controllers over German, Dutch, Belgian, Luxembourg airspace agree, and they climb it to 37 or 390 because it's super optimal and the pilots are happy. Well, actually, in Hungary, many hundreds of miles away, some poor controller's now got an aeroplane where it shouldn't be, at a level it shouldn't be at, even though it's all safe and coordinated. And they've planned for the aircraft to be at 350, 390, and vice versa. And when you've then got capacity constraints where you've regulated a portion of airspace, and let's say the aircraft was due to fly through it, apologies for the gesticulations here in the background, but if you're due to fly through that and you're not there because you've got higher, which is great for sustainability, but that's lost capacity. That's a slot, if you like, in that bit of airspace that's not being used. Equally, you could end up in a piece of airspace that's got a regulation on that's not counting on you being there because you were filed to fly at a different level. So that's the sort of altogether now think network approach. If I may, very briefly, prioritizing the first rotation is another priority for us. 1 minute of delay on the first rotation on a busy day with, let's say, can end up at 4 or 5 minutes of delay at the end of the day to a particular airframe.
Can you help us with first rotation there?
Yeah, so that's, thank you. There's an official definition of first rotation is between GMT, Universal Time Coordinate. So the local time in the UK right now is GMT, and in the summer when the clocks change locally, this hour is still classed as GMT. So it's between 3 and 9 GMT is the first rotation, and that's the first movement of an airframe in that time frame. So if that particular airframe is delayed by 1 minute on a bad day with lots of delays in the network for whatever reason, that 1 minute could equal 4 or 5 minutes. So if you imagine you're delayed by 10 minutes here out of Gatwick, as I happen to be here, for whatever reason, make no one wrong. Well, that airframe could be 50 minutes late on its last rotation throughout the day, thereby putting passengers in the wrong place, missing connections, not being able to land at the airport of intended destination because of a curfew, i.e. no more landings after 11 p.m. local or whatever it may be. So that really does make a huge difference to make sure the first wave of departures get airborne and get out on time. And that requires everyone, the air traffic controllers, the pilots, the ground handlers, the airports, everyone in that ballet, everyone in the ecosystem to be getting those aircraft moving and having the right amount of capacity available, the right amount of focus available on getting those aircraft moving realistic schedules, it comes from the planning as well, making sure that the schedules are realistic. If you've got a departure at 6 a.m. GMT, Greenwich Mean Time, for example, in the morning, and your ground handling crew as an airline is turning up at 5 to 6, strikes the innocent observer that maybe you won't get off on time because they'll only just be, kicking the machines, getting the things ready to push back and so on and so forth. So realistic scheduling is really important as well. So those are some of the things that Think Network is really trying to reflect.
Superb. Thank you, Stephen. Steve, we have a question linked to 2025 that's coming from our audience. So Rachel from DFT has asked, what lessons are you applying that you've learned from 2025 and previous years, including successes and failures, to inform your approach for 2026?
Yeah, I think every organisation in aviation focus on continuous improvement. So we are no different. So every November, following the previous summer, we analyse what's happened in the previous years, and we create a list of priorities, often internal, as to what we can do in terms of looking at things better for the previous summer ahead. A lot of that is collaboration with our partners, so it's collaboration with our airline customers. We hold then a forum, usually after our end of season review, where we share that findings with our airline customers and talk them through it and work on what we can do collectively ahead of the next summer to make those improvements. One of the challenges for us is predictability of the future seasons. Is always later in the year than people think, because right now we're coming to slot handback, where airlines finalise their schedules for the coming summer season, which kicks over at the slot change in March. I can't remember the exact date, and then that sets the new IATA season in schedule with the summer flights, and so we only get sight of that a little bit later, but we plan on probably 80% of that right now, and we use models from previous years to see where our hotspots were in our network. Stephen's talked about capacity loss there, first rotation. How can we improve on those elements to make sure the network runs better? So a lot of analysis goes on by our teams, and then a lot of work with airports and airlines throughout this winter period, which is ongoing now. We're in the middle of that cycle, and with Eurocontrol that continues that.
Thank you, Steve. Stephen, come in.
Yeah, I was just one thing that you mentioned there, Steve, which is really key, and I know this was your bread and butter in your airline world, as it were, before you joined NATS. That slot process, for the audience who may not be aware, we're talking in this sense about when an airline has a slot on the runway at the airport of arrival. So let's say it's what now, 25 past 3 almost. So it's 25 past 3. I use Heraklion because it's a nice destination. So at Heraklion, if I've got a slot on that runway at 25 past 3, it will be for usually an hour's window. And the airport will, through the slot coordination process, which is separate to the network manager, separate to NSPs, will have a slot purchased on that runway, if you like. Now, that doesn't guarantee that aircraft will be at that runway during that slot, because it's a runway slot, and that's how airports, through the slot coordination process, manage the capacity of their runway in advance for the scheduling that Steve refers to. But if an aircraft turns up early, or if an aircraft turns up late, that introduces different problems of that airfield, which is when you get these imbalances of demand and peaks in demand, which have to then be regulated with an air traffic slot. And sorry to mix the words there. So that is a really key part of the network, this slot coordination process at the airports. And right now, I was very lucky last month with the colleagues from EUACA, which is one of the governing bodies of the slot coordination process, to be in Rome last week with the sort of slot optimization meeting, where the airports and the airlines are optimizing their slots. Can I have this one instead of that one, between the airport and the airline, between the airlines and between the airports? You can imagine perhaps something from a trading room where you're trading slot for slot, trying to get the best optimal network. But airlines are businesses, airports are businesses, of course. So airlines are trying to get the very best out of their assets, the aircraft, trying to sell as many seats as possible, preferably more than their competitors, I assume. And so are always looking for the arrival time that will suit their needs. But that aircraft has to get there in reality. And so there's, we could say from planning, and Steve's quite right, planning starts in November, looking at the last year. Planning actually is years in advance in some cases about what's likely to be the need, what can the commercial department sell next year, but in 5 years' time, where's the next hotspot destination going to be? And in all of that, we have to deliver the network collaboratively with all of the stakeholders. But something has been planned and prepared months, years in advance in terms of these slots. It's a really interesting process.
Yeah, Stephen, to pick up your point, I think what really is interesting is with airlines and airports, they're aiming towards a fixed schedule. So they know what that schedule is in terms of that aeroplane is on that stand, it's scheduled for that time in the morning. Air traffic management works on time over space. So you've got, in the summer, we have 8,500 movements at its max, 8,000 to 8,500. This time of year, we're down at 5,000 to 5,500 movements per day. So significant disparity between winter and summer. So in the summer, you've got 8,000 movements living their own journey, living their own experience, where Stephen talked earlier about the knock-on of first rotation delays. And we, in our operational teams on the day, have to dynamically watch that happen and interact with that to ensure, back to the first point about safety, we're keeping it safe, but equally, we are finding alternatives to make that airspace run as efficiently as possible. So we offer reroutes, we offer potential level caps at the time to try and avoid that capacity restricted area that we spoke about. So we are managing time over points, and the airlines and airports are managing the said schedule and the actual departure off the airport.
Thank you both. This is an absolute masterclass. As we look ahead to 2026, then, you've spoken about how you do the retrospective and you learn lessons based on the previous year. What are likely to be the big challenges that you think we'll see this year?
If you go first, Stephen, because
thank you. If I may, from
in a meeting talking about it.
Yeah, exactly. From a network perspective, as in the Eurocontrol network, if I may, Steve's absolutely right. The UK around 8,500 flights on a busy summer's day, something in that order. France, for example, 12,000 last summer over the airspace of France. The whole of the European network, the Eurocontrol network, 37,200 flights-ish on the busy days last year. So an average of just around 35,000 throughout the whole of the summer period, but peaking at 37,200. So that's an awful lot of traffic going through the system. Just as an aside, if you compare that to the United States, around 45,000 flights. And, there's quite a difference in the size of the airspace, as well as other issues that they have different to how we have it. For example, Steve rightly says it's 8,500 for the United Kingdom for NATS, but of course that's one country, one member state, one regulator, not just one ANSP. There are competitors in this country, but one en route ANSP. Well, the whole network has 42 member states, 42 regulators. Even though EASA sits over the European ones, there are still individual regulators, departments of transport, and so on and so forth. So the coordination involved is huge amongst all of those agencies, and I think that's a real key. We're just coming to the end of the summer planning in collaboration with all of the NSPs, many meetings. I mean, NATS are terribly efficient, terribly good efficient at these meetings, but some other NSPs, it takes many more meetings. One of my colleagues said to me the other day that ANSPX, let's be fair, they'd had many meetings and they were still pushing to get the final pieces of information. The airlines are great at sharing their information with us, the airports too, but we're coming now to what we call the culmination of the planning for summer. The third week of February, I think, is the finalising meeting between the airlines and the ANSPs and Eurocontrol for the summer planning for 2026. And that is where Steve says we're then looking at well, where are the capacity imbalances with the demand that we know is coming? What things can we do structurally that won't cause delay? So rerouting, instead of flying the most efficient Great Circle route from, I don't know, Edinburgh to Istanbul, maybe there'll have to be a dogleg over Italy or something structurally, because that will help offload traffic from where we can already see there's a capacity versus demand imbalance. And that's getting really close to the culmination of the process now. And then, as Steve says, tactically and pre-tactically and post-operatively throughout the summer, we're busy working on optimizing what's left, if you like, and what we're still trying to do, which could even be turning on and off some of these processes.
So if I just add to
Stephen.
that, we've had our meeting with Stephen and the team, or some of the planning team, where we talk about what traffic we're expecting, what Eurocontrol are expecting for us. That happens during late December, and then we've just concluded that process now. So in terms of what we're looking at next summer, we know in the UK, we know our airspace, we know that we see traffic in the same capacity bottlenecks. So high levels above London and above Manchester are always quite constrained sectors. There's a lot of demand, traffic going out through the North Atlantic. And what we have to remember about the UK, we have some of the largest airports in the world, in 40 miles of each other, with Stansted, Luton, Gatwick, Heathrow and London City all vying within that southeast of England. So UK airspace is extremely constrained in that area, but we still don't generate too much delay. We manage it as best we can. And that's where this time of year is that predictability of what we're expecting, depending on the result of those airline schedules that Stephen talked about. So a lot of work still to do. The actual summer really kicks in towards the middle of May. The early part, sort of the clock change into April and May, is a bit of a transition. We call them shoulder periods. But what we're seeing now throughout the summer, that's extending right the way through October to clock change actually at the end of October. And October traffic is equal to some of those earlier months.
Thank you both. Steve, I think perhaps a continuation one for you. You've both spoken about the demand placed by the airlines, but I understand schedules are impacted by lots of different factors, airspace changes, big sporting events, weather events. How do you factor all of those different competing pressures, I guess, in to create that overarching plan?
So we internally in my team, we have a number of planning functions across various different parts of the operation. So, we'll have training planning, we'll have program and project planning, we'll have flow management planning, and we bring that together to create an ops plan that for the summer, where any big transitions we're planning, so airspace changes, will go into that as well. We've actually got an airspace change that we are doing in March, towards the middle of March. That's introducing free route airspace into our Prestwick Centre controllers. So the training for that is ongoing now, and the transition is due in March. So the planning for that project has been going on for a number of years in the background, and typically airspace projects do. We like to deploy them in the winter when, as I explained before, the traffic is significantly lower, and then that gives us a chance to test the new airspace live as the new controllers get used to it, and then we're ready for the summer, fully transition to the new airspace. So that's one example of planning an airspace change. Weather's a really interesting one. We talked earlier about weather being fairly benign in 25. For the UK, actually 24, 25 has not been too bad in the summer months. 23 was a really bad weather summer throughout July, August. And given that's where the peak traffic is, that is the unknown. So I think for us, whether if you get a thunderstorm at 7 o'clock in the morning on a Friday, the impact of that is absolutely significant compared to it occurring at 2 o'clock in the middle of the night on a Saturday. So when weather occurs, as well as how severe it is and how regular it is in any given year, is such a variable we just have to manage. it's fair to say that in terms of management of that, we look at that as part of our analysis and our planning processes, but we also work closely with Stephen and the Eurocontrol team of what we call cross-border weather, where we look at off and on-load routes to avoid when big thunderstorms cross those borders effectively, of how we can then quickly move traffic onto those routes without causing too much disruption.
Thank you very much, Steve. Stephen, is there a European perspective in there as well, perhaps?
I think, yeah, because Steve's got it and hit the nail on the head, as they say. But the other thing I would say is in that last example, for a point, is yeah, sure, the UK's weather was slightly more benevolent in the last couple of years than perhaps elsewhere, but the effects on UK PLC of inclement, convective, poor weather, whatever you want to call it, thunderstorms in the European network makes a huge difference. Here at Gatwick, you'll have take a non-convective weather example. If there's a very strong jet stream over the Atlantic, say 150, 170 knot tailwinds effectively, that will materially affect the arrival time of aircraft early in the morning here from the American side of the Atlantic. And if they turn up an hour early or an hour and a half early, well, one of two things is going to happen. They're going to land, lovely. They're going to go to the gate, and then there'll be no one there to either deal with immigration or deal with the passengers or put the gate onto the aircraft. Or in some cases, and it happens perhaps in the situation in Lisbon and Dublin and other places, sometimes the aircraft have to go into the hold and just go round and round in circles, which is not great for the sustainability. So weather isn't just convective this time of year. Of course, we've got fog, snow, and whatnot else, but it has a huge factor to play, and some small issue will actually have huge knock-on effects elsewhere. So yeah, I think it's a really important part of the network planning, but also the tactical work of the operations.
So on that point then, when thinking about kind of building resilience into our operation, Steve, can you tell us a little bit about how the implementation of intelligent approach and pairwise separation has affected arrivals at Heathrow?
Yeah, so I think Stephen talking about that example of that eastbound traffic coming in from the US affecting the UK is something that we have to manage day in and day out. And of course, just reflecting back on the upper airspace capacity issues we talk about, we have to plan for, is that traffic coming north about in the UK because of the jet streams, or is it further south coming in over the west and the Cornwall, and likewise the westbound tracks, do they go north about, south about on any given day? And that moves traffic across our airspace, and our controllers are trained in specific sectors, so it's not, we can't just simply move controllers to control specific airspace when that happens. So that is part of our planning process that we really have to balance. But back onto the point of managing that traffic as it comes in, and if we take Heathrow as the example, that traffic typically takes up a hold because there's a lot of traffic trying to get into Heathrow at that first rotation. And last year we introduced pairwise, part of intelligent approach, which there's a great altitude on that for anyone watching that wants to go and watch that. They will do the technical detail far better than I will, but from an operational perspective, essentially that has delivered what we expected. We've managed to reduce the separation and increase the landing rate at Heathrow, which has been part of Heathrow's really successful performance in 2025. We talk about planning and how planning is done, but it's simply about collaboration. Not one entity in this industry can work alone to succeed. We have to work together, and Heathrow demonstrated a fantastic job of that. So not just with NATS's involvement, but their own programme working with their airlines. British Airways were significant in that as well. Working with the ground handling partners, as Stephen was describing earlier. This is the ballet as part of that. They had big initiatives going on, and pairwise was a piece of that has delivered a significant improvement in Heathrow performance, which we of course hope we're here to stay, but there are so myriad of variables that can affect this year ahead. We're planning for a successful year, but like any year, it's what gets thrown at us that we are not expecting that we have to deal with, and we've had something every single year to do in that scenario.
Thank you, Steve. You mentioned British Airways there. We've had a question from Sophia from British Airways. She's asked, what can airlines do collaboratively to help the congested airspace, and how can they support NATS?
Stephen's actually covered a lot of this, because the Think Network campaign actually covers a lot of the requirements that we want as an ANSP. So what's really important, and to try and talk about this without getting too technical, every airline files a flight plan, which is the start of understanding what the demand's going to be. So we can do all the planning, but actually we only truly understand what any given day is going to be like when the airline files that flight plan on the journey. So once those flight plans are filed, keeping those up to date relative to the performance of their own operation is critical to us, because that feeds then the information that goes into the Eurocontrol system. That gives us visibility of when demand is going to appear over certain parts of UK airspace. So it gives us that better option to ensure we are proactive and not reacting to traffic that we didn't expect. And as Stephen talked about lots of capacity earlier, that is the effect of that. And this is not just to point out in airlines, it's that systematic thing. There's no one entity that's the cause, there's no one the problem. But together, it's the combination of techniques. So from back to the question, I think British Airways do a great job with us anyway in terms of collaboration. We are very, very close to them, as we are with a number of our airline partners. I wouldn't want to just exclude the others on this call, because every single one of them that we work with and come to our forums are really important, and understanding their needs, understanding what their troubles are critical to us, and that helps us in the entire planning process for every year.
If I may, I'm sorry, Russell, Steve, on the back of that, if I can, I mentioned earlier this acronym PDPI. It's pre-departure information, but effectively it's exactly what you've just described, Steve. So when a flight is operating, the flight plan is filed, and that has an estimated time of departure, an estimated off blocks time. That is based on originally on the schedule. You know, if it was originally planned, when we go back to that conversation about slots on the runway, when it was originally planned to leave at 3:25, I think was the example I gave, then that would be effectively what they file, unless something's changed since that point. Airlines own their own flight plan. The ANSP doesn't, we don't as Eurocontrol network manager. But if they don't update that off blocks time, the planned time that they think they're going to be able to get that aircraft moving, as Steve says, it gives inaccurate information, reduced predictability to the sector counts, if you like. So therefore, what we have is a system operating in the background that doesn't touch the flight plan, that will tell our system that issues all of the regulations to the network when requested by the air traffickers, and the individual slots for the aircraft tells it to not give that aircraft at this particular time, because it can't possibly achieve it, because the airframe itself is still airborne or has arrived an hour and a half late at the airport for whatever reason. And so that increases predictability. When we trialed it last year, and we're working with all the arrangements to get it in full time this year, that showed last year not just a reduction in delay, but an increase in predictability around 2.5 hours in advance of where that flight will be through the airspace of about 30%. That's huge. It really is. Sorry, I'm getting excited now, but it's a massive development. And, you know, it's not making airlines wrong at all. I mean, if an EOBT is not updated, there could be many reasons for that. But actually, just having that greater predictability means that Steve and the colleagues can have the right controllers at the right time, subject to their rostering on the day, in the right sectors, and have more faith in that information that they're presented with than perhaps they've had in the past. Sorry, I get excited about things like this. It's really interesting stuff.
Stephen, it's brilliant. We are running into the final couple of minutes of the show, and I want to cover something that has come up on Altitude quite a lot. So artificial intelligence, AI, and big data as well. Also, what role does that play in the forecasting and the planning of our operations going forward?
I could start from the NATS perspective.
Please.
From our analytics team, use machine learning in some of the modelling for traffic. But we also use significant amounts of data from many streams. I think this whole chat, there's an industry within every single subject we've touched on in this last 45 minutes. and the data that underpins that, and the statistics. But I've always talked within NATS about the three pillars of it. Is that you need modeling for future, and that's where AI and machine learning has a place. You need to look back as well, because typically trends are there, and making the same mistakes is something that we clearly want to avoid. But the third one, and the most important one, is that contextual expertise of our operational staff. We have an incredible team in our ops rooms of controllers, supervisors, FMP staff, and beyond that, support staff that are getting involved in supporting them. And the amount of data that we harvest to make the right decisions is critical to them. So absolutely, we are data rich in NATS, and it's using that to enhance decisions and see how technology can take us forward.
Lovely answer. Thank you, Steve. Stephen, come in.
If I may, just very briefly then, from the Eurocontrol perspective, the Director General has recently launched this latest vision, if you like, called Trajectory 2030. And I won't go into the details, but apart from being great in many senses, it has effectively three key tenets. Engage, deliver, and modernize. Well, we've spoken about engage already today. We've spoken about deliver, that's the operational. Engage is planning and dealing with stakeholders. Modernize, so coming to the question of AI and big data, everything Steve says, yes. In ATM, we're also utilizing AI in coding. So when we're developing our new system, INM, which has been being rolled out in phases over some time now and continues to do so, but comes to be business as normal next year, for example, we are using at Eurocontrol AI to help reduce the time it takes for our developers and software coders to do the coding, and AI is doing some of that to make it faster, to mean that we can, in my simple air traffic brain, can do more with what we have in terms of the resources available. So yeah, AI and machine learning in post-operational data, and the feedback is important, but also now we can start looking at it in terms of systems and software development, which even for an air traffic controller like me is exciting about the future. So I think, yeah, it's exciting, but as Steve says, there's a whole industry out there that are well ahead of he and I in terms of their understanding of it.
And clearly industries within industries as well. So final question for you both. Thinking big picture, if there was one change that you could make to how the network is managed, what would it be? Steve, would you like to take that one first?
Well, I think this discussion just shows there is probably not one single thing that will fix everything or make anything better. We have to remember that, as I touched on before, demand in peak summer is really high, but then in winter it's really low. So there is no capacity problems in UK airspace at this point in time. In January and February, that increases through the year. So I think that looking how we manage to those peaks of the summer and continue to improve on that is certainly one area. But I think the ultimate thing that we all want to move as much traffic as possible, as punctual as possible, with as safely as possible, effectively.
Thank you, Steve. And Stephen?
Thank you. It's a great question, and I wish I could narrow it down. In my planning, thinking ahead, if you like, I'd come to two really. One is around network flow management. So I go back to Think Network, which you very kindly raised earlier. Right now, for example, if for whatever reason the UK needs to regulate a piece of airspace, that has knock-on effects elsewhere. We could, from a network perspective, arguably say, actually, if we put a regulation on over German airspace, that will solve the problem that the UK has with whatever it is, and cause less delay and least complexity in the network. We can't yet do that because right now, in this example I've given, Germany would then be, the delays would be counted against Germany, yet it's not their problem. They've done a network thing. So I guess I'm coming to network delay pots, network delay budgets, that we could say the most efficient and effective way of dealing with the problem, the capacity constraint that we have, is this regulation here, from a network perspective. The second one would be perhaps more around an airspace that has much more harmonization with it, not 42 different ways of doing things. That's a really difficult thing to achieve, but that would make a massive difference. Trajectory based operations also to come. That's in the planning. I mean, yeah, there's lots to come. As Steve says, there's no magic silver bullet, but there are so many great ideas coming, and it's only working collaboratively with all of the stakeholders, whatever the business rationale behind those stakeholders needs. Only if we work collectively will we achieve improvements, for sure.
There's another altitude there, I think, Stephen.
Another one to come. Thank you both massively for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure. It's been a fascinating conversation. Thank you to you, our audience, as well, for watching and for your great questions. As usual, Altitude will be available after the show on YouTube and on nats.aero, along with an audio podcast. That was Altitude. Thank you very much, and goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.